Most organizations have a lot, some organizations tens of thousands of reports and dashboards and models that they have to maintain, and that consumes most of the energy for those teams. And if you're struggling to deliver value, you've got to find time and energy to be able to drive the changes that you need to focus more on value, and that's very difficult when you've got a very heavy business as usual workload.
Business leaders are underwhelmed by the value they're getting from reporting, insights, and analytics functions. Despite massive investments and promise, 3 in 4 analytics implementations fail. The main issue is a lack of strategic clarity. Many teams fail to define how data and analytics will help achieve business goals, focusing on the what of dashboards rather than the why of impact. The solution starts with the right strategy. Joining me here today is Principal Research Director, Steve Willis. Steve, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Jeff. Appreciate it.
Maybe I'll start right off the bat with the question, why is this important? Why should organizations care about building a strategy for their reporting and analytics function?
Yeah, sure. I think the key thing when it comes to reporting and analytics and insights is that every organization is dependent on information and reporting and insights to make their key business decisions, whether that's strategic or whether it's operational. And if you don't have access to that information when you need it in the forms that you need it, your fundamental decision-making is at risk. Like you don't know whether you have sound decision-making if you're not basing it off kind of facts and information readily available to you. So if you don't have an effective reporting and insights team and analytics strategy, it's very difficult to be able to get the reporting that you need. And that has downsides for your business in terms of just the effectiveness of your business decision-making, increasing risk, increasing costs, not being able to execute on hopefully the things that you want to achieve as an organization.
One of the things that caught my attention is looking at all the research we've published. Over the past year, this particular reporting and analytics strategy has actually been the number one most requested piece of research. And I'm curious, why you think that is. Why is this kind of the why now moment for this?
I think there's probably 2 or 3 reasons for that. AI has obviously been one of those key things. People sort of, as they're trying to get the most out of AI or implement AI for the first time, are realizing that kind of data itself is a bit of an issue. So that's obviously a natural kind of tendency towards how do we improve the things that we do for data. Reporting and analytics is a consumption pattern, but it obviously relies on the production of data to you. So again, that's probably one of the drivers behind it. Another is the fact that, as you stated at the beginning, there's a huge failure rate in kind of reporting and analytics teams traditionally. Like business intelligence has been around for a couple of decades, and yet business leaders are really unhappy generally about not having access to information that they need. In a world where most business leaders understand that being data-driven is incredibly important, there's a lot of frustration around that. So again, I think we're starting to see that come to the fore. And hopefully when they've looked at the research, they've kind of realized that we're taking a different approach, almost like a paradigm shift. Data and analytics, business intelligence has typically been a very technology-focused discipline, whereas actually what we're saying is it's a business-focused discipline. Like if you think about the term business intelligence, the key's in the business, not as the sort of main focus piece. And so like we're encouraging people when they're generating the strategy to think about your customer, internal or external, being solely focused on those things. So I think there's kind of a couple of external factors, as I said, within the AI and the fact that sort of reporting and analytics is not performing to sort of executive expectations. And then that's that hopefully they're looking at this research saying, this is interesting. This is taking us down a different path.
So I want to come back to this this notion of this failure rate, right? Which is 3 in 4. It's astronomical. Yeah. What are organizations getting wrong about reporting and analytics strategies?
Well, I think in general, what we see most of the time, there's a couple of different factors that play there. Reporting and analytics teams are often don't feel empowered to kind of work with the business, challenge what the business is saying, and so they're not necessarily understanding the problem and meeting the need because they don't feel empowered or have the authority to do those things. That's one fairly common challenge. The other is that it's a very technical discipline. It's been very sort of grown up typically through technology, through IT, and not through the business functions themselves. And so there's probably a lack of business understanding and understanding of the customer. So if you're dealing with reporting for finance, it's good to have a good understanding of the finance domain. If you're doing it for sales, it's good to have the sales domain. And if you're a technical team focusing on kind of the flow of data into the report or into the analytical model, you're not necessarily thinking about the actual end consumption, the problem that you're trying to solve. So I think it's kind of a combination of those 2 things that's generally a sort of the root cause for failure. And it's, I think the key thing for most analytics teams is, when it comes to the strategy, is about setting clear goals for what you're trying to achieve. And that's one of the things that the strategy that we're helping organizations to produce, hopefully address.
And so when you're talking to organizations who are, seeking, support here, what are they feeling? Kind of what are you hearing on the ground? What are their kind of symptoms and pain points?
There's a few of those. So typically we see lack of business engagement in the services provided by certainly centralized reporting and analytics teams, and that even happens when you're in a federated model. So an analytics team within marketing may not get the buy-in from the rest of the marketing function. So that's kind of one thing. A lack of understanding or buy-in to the actual products and services that are given. So and that stems from a couple of different things. Sometimes those solutions are too complicated. The business kind of shrugs their shoulders like, how am I supposed to use this? Or they don't trust the underlying data that's within those applications. That's a fairly common problem. And generally, I think the final aspect of that is really around, as I said before, agreeing on the tangible value of the thing that you're doing. So I think a lot of people consider to be kind of reporting and analytical insights intangible. Like it's just improving the way that we make decisions. Unless you agree up front with your business stakeholders, like if we're able to give you this information that's going to help you solve this problem, what does that actually mean in a tangible form? It's very difficult for you to kind of demonstrate the value of what you're doing. One of those challenges we often hear is that an insights team will give information to a business unit without having agreed that up front. And of course, the business unit is going to say, well, of course we know we made that decision. We were always going to make that decision, right? And so it's a hard thing, and it's a discipline you have to learn how to do as a reporting and insights function, to work with your business stakeholders and partner with them up front to say, what's the value we're going to agree here? So if we're successful in this venture, I need you to recognize from my function and sort of advocate for our services that we enabled you to deliver this value to the organization.
Steve, I want to talk through some of the key insights that came out of this particular piece of research. The first one, is all about considering reporting and analytics as, a product or service versus kind of a back office function. Can you expand on why that's so important and what that means in practice?
Yeah, certainly. I think it's one of the key challenges we see for most reporting and insights teams. When you're building, whether it's an analytical model, whether it's a report or a dashboard, it becomes part of the business operations, part of a process. People are making decisions on that. In order for people to rely on those things, it has to be like a real product. They have to trust that it's going to work properly. They have to trust that it's going to be reliable. A lot of the time, teams develop a dashboard and it's kind of, we think it's done. And it's not, because you have to make sure that dashboard is maintained. And we see it all the time. I can give examples of teams where they have reporting baked into, say, a sales process where the sales teams are out on the ground on a Monday morning, getting incredibly frustrated because when they log into their report or dashboard, the thing doesn't work because the overnight processing hasn't happened. It has real tangible business impacts. You can be sat in front of a customer in a B2B situation where that happens. And so you have to think about, it's actually a service you're providing. It's not the end result. It's the whole thing. It's a whole package like a product. You have to support it. People have to be able to trust it. It has to be available when they need it. And unless you approach it that way, you're always going to struggle. And I think typically most people haven't thought like that. Most data and analytics teams are data experts or analytic experts. They're not product experts, or they're not consumer experts. And you have to put yourself in the shoes of the person that's consuming the product to say, what's important to them? How are they using this? What context are they using it in? What happens if it goes wrong? You have to answer those questions as you would do with any other kind of traditional product development. And I think that's a different skill set to most data and analytics and insights teams typically have today.
It sounds like one of the issues is that, if you're going to do this strategy effectively, there's just a good amount of upfront planning required and kind of, requirement solicitation. What do you actually need? That's not getting done, right? Is there a temptation for people to just jump right to, I can build you a dashboard?
I think the natural habit to move towards straight to solution is probably quite a common problem for most people, and it's just magnified within data and analytics. I think the challenge is about listening to your business. Yeah. And it actually goes beyond that. It's about hearing the problem. It's not just listening. Because listening would typically say, I would like a dashboard for this, or I'd like an analytical model for that. That's not your job. Your job is to solve a business problem with the use of data and analytics. So you actually have to understand the problem that the business is trying to solve for. You're not taking orders. And I think a lot of analytics teams are taking orders for dashboards or models, and that's not your job. Your job is to be passionate about understanding the problem that they have and solving that problem. And that's a very different set of skills than the ones that are required to actually build the model or the dashboard or the data pipelines that flow through to those things. That's about listening to what people are saying to you, hearing what they don't say to you. That's as important. Being able to challenge and say, well, why do you do that? Explain to me more. How is that a problem? Again, come back to the why. We tend to use frameworks like 5 whys to help people really get to the heart and the root cause of the issue the business is trying to solve. Because the business is not going to thank you for giving a dashboard that doesn't help them do something different or improve their focus. But if you're able to give them an insight that changes the game for the things that they do, they will remember that and they'll come to you for more of those things. And that's the key challenge.
So when you work with organizations that have, typically over-indexed on more of the technical side here and the solution delivery versus the understanding, to get from here to there, what are you finding that looks like? Is it adding new staff? Is it changing the skills of the existing staff? Is it creating new roles? What's typically required to get there?
It can be a combination of either. It depends on the organization itself and kind of the culture. I would say I think it's a good thing for all technical people to invest in their more, like people typically call soft skills. We tend to label them more power skills. That's things like critical thinking and design thinking and empathy and human-centered design. And within our thought model for this application, we actually anchor everything in those key concepts. But they are important skills for everybody to learn, I would say, in technology more broadly, not just within data and analytics, because they are the sort of the key skills for how you engage with your business, with your customers to understand their need. And again, I think you can uplift everybody. BAs are probably the most important role. I would see one of the most sort of common patterns for analytics teams is they don't invest in the business analysis side. Business analysts typically have those kind of softer skills in abundance, but they play that game between technical and business and help translate those things. And that's a really important skill that's probably underinvested for most insights teams. I would say it's probably typical for most projects in general, to be honest, but I'd say most analytics teams that we see are not packed heavy with BAs, and then they wonder why the requirements are not gathered correctly. BAs are worth their weight in gold in my mind, and most analytics teams don't invest in it heavily enough.
Right. So Steve, we're kind of going into the next insight now, which is all about the role of design thinking as a skill, across reporting and analytics teams. What does that look like? Is that, the role of BAs? Where does that fit, and what does that get you?
So in terms of developing design thinking skills, it's for everybody within the team. So if you think about design thinking as what it's actually trying to do, it's to break apart problems and reconstruct them in different ways, approach them in an innovative new way. We do it as a business in terms of kind of what we call dark horse thinking. It's about breaking from conventional logic and thinking about a problem in a different light. If you want to be able to answer business problems, you need to first understand the problem. So when it comes to the first part of design thinking, it's really the human-centered design, anchoring yourself in empathy, being able to understand and listen to the problem. Once you've understood the problem, it's about looking at, well, what's the traditional way to do this? Is that going to get us the right outcome? If not, if we actually discard that thinking, how do we think differently to come up with a solution that's going to provide the answer in a way that perhaps hasn't been thought of before, or is going to give us a better result than we had before? And they're the type of skills that you need to develop. And they're very difficult skills. They're learned skills. Like everybody can learn those skills. They're not inherent. So, it's about investing in your people's skills outside of the technology domain. And of course, everybody wants to be up to date with the latest tools and technologies, but actually they're not the most important skills. They change all the time, as we know. And so these kind of anchored skills, design thinking being the most critical at the center, are the most important ones to develop.
I feel like we've kind of covered that. Is there more to say? I feel like...
No, as I say, I can't emphasize the point more. Like understanding your business and their pain points is what you're there to do. You should be passionate about solving the problem, not passionate about the solution, right? It's an easy trap to fall into, to love the thing that you've built, whether it's an analytical model or the dashboard, but actually it doesn't matter. It's about whether you've solved the problem for the customer. So as I said, like we've discussed it at length, but if anybody was to take anything away, I'd say make sure you invest in the skills that enable you to understand your business partners, your customers deeply, because that's the thing that's going to separate you from being successful and not.
Well said. There's a separation here that we talk about between reporting and analytics, insights as a function versus data management as a function. And yet there's still some interdependencies there. What does that look like, and what does that mean, in the world of reporting and analytics?
Yeah, certainly. And there is definitely that distinction between kind of the analytics side and the data management side. They are, of course, two sides of the same coin. Like the data and analytics and insights is the consumption part of data management, essentially. And you have a dual role. One is typically when you're presenting information, whether it's an analytical model, whether it's a report, whether it's a dashboard, you're shining a light on the issues that you have with data. You're typically around data quality in terms of, is the data correct? Is it complete? Is it accurate? Is it timely for what I need? And if you understand that your role is going to shine a light on that, you have a natural dependency on the other disciplines of data management around your data governance and your data quality and your pipeline development. And so you have to work in conjunction with those teams. It's not your job to solve those issues. That's the job of the other teams, but it is your job to present reasons to why the business should want to invest in helping these teams solve these problems. And the good thing that it does when you shine that light on is, as you've started to give that information to the businesses, they can start to see how it's going to help them solve the problem. It makes it more of an imperative to do the things to make that data better quality or more available. And of course, that then helps promote the sponsorship, as I said, to those other teams. So you have to work in conjunction. You have to recognize there's that dependency and work in kind of unison to make sure that where you're shining the light, it's actually helpful to those teams.
So let's talk a little bit tactically about that for a minute, because it's not unusual to find an organization where data quality is poor, or there's certainly data quality issues. In a reporting and analytics function, there can be a tendency or a temptation to say, well, data quality is bad, so nothing we can do, or nothing we can do here. Is that the right approach, or is there an opportunity to kind of partner and maybe help the data management function discover where quality is more necessary?
That connection between quality issues and how you use the data is the most potent and powerful opportunity you have for identifying the things that you need. So your data and analytics function and your insights function should be focused on what's most important to the organization in terms of its problems and its solutions. And of course, you're going to naturally shine a light on the quality issues. Quality is like beauty, it's in the eye of the beholder. So the consumption team will have a different opinion on what is quality than possibly the team that's producing that data. And that's okay, that's kind of standard practice. You have to think about, what do I need to invest in improving the quality to meet this particular need, whether it's a report, a dashboard, an analytical model, and make a decision about how far you want to go with that. What's the value of that? Is it going to outcome in a way that generates more value to the business than it does in spending sort of improving that data quality? And so it's always a constant challenge. You're looking at your analytics teams to identify where the value comes from, where it touches the real business process and the value that you're driving, and then how do you identify the quality and what you put into that, what you invest in that to fix. I think most people who consume data, and if you look at the statistics around business leaders being frustrated, it's because the data, they would say, the data is not good quality, but most of them can't articulate why it's not. And so part of the role is to understand, why is that of poor quality for the thing that you're trying to do? And then you look along the flow of the data to say, okay, where is the best place for us to be able to fix that? And does it make sense for us to do it there commercially? Is it like the most cost-effective way to do it? And sometimes the onus is going to put that onto your teams that are producing the insights to put back-end fixes. Might seem not the smartest way to do it, but actually it's much more efficient than trying to force a whole bunch of processing teams at the beginning of the process to make a change when you want them focused on other things. And that's kind of where your data governance comes in, and the connection between the different disciplines is how you manage those things. So most organizations have a lot, probably thousands, sometimes some organizations, tens of thousands of reports and dashboards and models that they have to maintain, and that consumes most of the energy for those teams. And if you're struggling to deliver value, you've got to find time and energy to be able to drive the changes that you need to focus more on value, and that's very difficult when you've got a very heavy sort of business as usual workload.
I'm so excited to be joined here today by this esteemed panel. We've got Ari Glazel, who is our AVP of Research, Steve Willis, Principal Research Director, and we've got Advisory Fellow Igor Ikonikov. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining me.
Thanks for having us. Pleasure to be here.
Maybe right off the bat, I want to talk a little bit about, one of the themes of this entire piece of research, which is, human-centric design, and this notion that it's kind of moving away from technical solutions to more of kind of this design approach. My question is, does this really belong in a reporting and analytics function, or should this be more embedded in the business? Like, is this really our job? Where should we be focusing, and how do we make sure that we are, kind of positioned to be successful?
Well, my personal belief and what I hear from members is that they're struggling to meet business needs, struggling to get the business to engage with their products and services, with their reports, their dashboards, their analytical models. So to me, it's the most natural thing that you should be thinking about, which is how do you understand your customer? How do you focus on those things? You should be passionate about solving business problems, not passionate about the technology focus. That's your job. That is your number one job, is to solve problems for the business with data. And the only way that you can do that is to develop and employ a set of skills, human-centered design thinking, that allow you to get to the heart of what your business's problem is. And if you get that right, people will use your products and services, and if you don't, they won't.
Unfortunately, what is very often underestimated is the complexity of your BI and analytical portfolio. It's not self-service BI or advanced analytics or just the two of them. It's the whole spectrum with everything in between. Controlled reports, self-service BI reports, semi-advanced analytics. You want to have data scientists, citizens data sciences, right? You want to have very advanced analytics with strategic, forward-looking projections, right? Everything on that will require a different operating model pattern, and it will require a huge grip or firm grip on the portfolio of reporting and analytics, right? Because to deliver insights with such variety in a variety of ways and in a variety of modality of data delivery, it does require fairly strong control, and it's not like let it loose, let everyone run whatever they want to run. No, you will come to a problem, and we had a client like this, right? They gave the business self-service platform, beautiful self-service platform. IT was top-notch, connected all the data to that platform, and half a year down the road, business came back to it and said, help us out. We created 10,000 reports. Nobody knows what those reports are for, how to handle them, and so on and so forth. So they went back to the basics. They went back to the governance and to portfolio management, identifying what reports are valuable, what reports are just for fun.
If you're just focused about the technology, then you really don't care, in my opinion, about the business. And so you want to have a culture where you have people that are really focused on solving those business problems. That takes a very set of specialized skills. And quite openly, does it reside in the business? Does it reside in IT? I would answer that and say yes. It kind of needs to be in both. It needs to be something that is, an attitude that is overall shared and it's overall embraced, across the organization.
I think you touched on something really interesting there, which we didn't cover earlier, which is around the business receptiveness to the human-centered design as well. They've typically been very successful doing the things the way they do things at the moment. And often when you're producing insights, you're asking them to think about things differently than they have been before. And as a technical team, it can be quite hard to break down that set of blinkers and get people to look outside. And you have to kind of earn their trust. You have to do that kind of incrementally. That's a hard skill to learn. And I think the other thing that we've kind of is really important for analytics teams, particularly those that are more technically minded, is that those skills, our analytical skills, generally the technical side, most people are involved in technology and data and analytics because they're analytically minded. They're less geared often to being kind of like extroverted and kind of a human-centered, like engaged in the business piece. And so of course it becomes a very difficult challenge to break down. In order to be effective, you actually have to have those skills. You have to be a blend of technology and people. Data and analytics teams struggle to engage with the business because it puts them in a place of personal discomfort. And as a leader of that function, you have to recognize that that's likely to be a challenge, and how do you address and how do you educate your team? And part of that is obviously the engagement for the business. They have to be open to that, and they have to be open to being challenged, and you have to have the mandate from a sponsorship perspective to be able to help that as well.
I want to push on that a little bit more, Steve, because I absolutely buy that, right? That we've got a profile of reporting and analytics expert that bristles a little bit at being put face to face, challenging business stakeholders. And, to be a little bit facetious, they prefer to be in their back room coming up with a solution. As a leader of this function, how do you break through that? Where do you start and how can you make progress?
It's about, here's my perspective on this, here are the challenges that I see it, and then here's the challenges that I see it, and then let's come together because you want to have a culture where you have people that want to do good work. Nobody wakes up in the morning and say, you know what, I'm going to be obstructive today, right?
Right.
No one does. Everyone wants to come in and do a good job.
You did touch on how do you go about doing this, and data is a change management program. Whether anybody wants to admit it or not, you're actually asking people to think and do things differently, and that's probably broadly the same for every project and technology focus. And that change has to be planned. It doesn't just happen organically. You have to understand your customers, understand their sentiment. Are they open to the type of change? And some will be and some won't be. Potentially focus your sort of initial efforts on those that are more receptive to it, because if you can take them on that journey, they'll advocate for your services. Typically across the leadership teams, they're going to share those stories, and hopefully that'll bring you a bit more invited into those areas where they're sort of more resistant to those things. And even when you're in a position where you're kind of being, struggling to get through and getting people to think differently and wanting to be receptive to change, you have to earn trust. And so sometimes that can be as simple as, okay, you've told me you want this thing. I'm going to go away and develop this, but I'm actually going to introduce some concepts that you were perhaps not expecting to come into here to show you what can be done if you think slightly differently. And often what you find when you're in that position is the business person will say, oh, I didn't realize you could do that. And suddenly the barriers start to come down, and they will go, what else can you do? And you just start to open it that way around. But you've built the trust by showing that you've listened to what they've said and tried to just stretch them a little bit.
Putting a bit of a cynical lens on this, I agree with everything you're saying, Steve, but bluntly, everybody just wants to be on the winning team. And so that if, with this interaction, if you can prove that, this is, I'm winning at this, that's a great way of breaking down barriers.
Right.
And so, you're asking about the how, just like what Steve was mentioning there, start off small, prove that you can knock down some important pins with them, then the trust will build. Everyone wants to win.
Right.
So that's how you get them on board.
I do want to talk about operating models and how this should be structured. And there's, a continuum or a spectrum of how this could be structured, with centralized on one end all the way to federated on the other. I hear implicitly that, federated is better. Is that right? And how should organizations choose the right operating model for them as they look to kind of build these deeper relationships with the business?
Let me probably start because I touched upon it. When I said you have to have a firm grip on the complete portfolio of analytics, I did not mean centralization. Mm-hmm. The actual teams building reports and interacting with the business to provide solutions to answer business questions, they should be autonomous. They should be use case specific. However, the centralized evaluation of what we are building, what is our capacity? IT in general and BI and analytics team specifically cannot be just order takers. You cannot just take every order like we used to have, ticket system, right? You put tickets. It doesn't work this way anymore. You have to have, as Ari said, a conversation, continuous conversation. And through that conversation, you naturally prioritize. And you have to be brave enough to talk to the business. Say, in my personal experience, it happened like this. Igor, here is the project. It will earn the company $50,000 a year. And I said, to deliver this solution, we will have to spend $150,000. Right. Would your project be sustainably bringing $50,000 a year for more than 3 years? If yes, we're doing this. If not, we're not. It's an unpleasant conversation, but it has to be happening, right? And say, back to the winning team. What is the definition of winning team? Apparently not the one who built the flashiest dashboard. It's the one who brought the biggest value through the analytics solutions to the company. But that is only possible if you have continuous and honest conversation with the business as peers, not as order takers.
Completely agree. By the way, there's one of the things that we've seen as a trend, and self-service business intelligence has been around probably for 10 plus years now. And the move towards federation, and I don't believe a fully federated model is probably the answer, and neither is essential. I think most organizations will end up with some degree of hybrid model because you need some central oversight for optimization typically. But the move towards federation is more to close the gap around understanding. Like typically the closer you are to understanding the business function that needs the insight, the better the outcome. So there are two different ways to do that. You can either position your whether it's your BI team or your reporting team or your data science team in the business function to solve that gap. Or you can keep it more centralized and you just have to bring that understanding in. And that could be, you second people into that team, or you upweight your business analysis team. What you have to look at is what is the problem that you're trying to solve for by that. And that is, how do you get speed to insight? That's the thing that you're trying to solve. Speed to insight and effectiveness.
So one of the things that's come up a few times already is this notion of self-service, which has been happening for a while. And so, when you couple that with what's happening now with AI, I can see for, business leaders, it's tempting to believe that the future of reporting and analytics is more and more self-serve, it's more and more AI, and it's, a smaller actual reporting and analytics function. Now, as we talked about this, I hear a little bit of a skepticism about this, but I wanted to ask you, is that the future? What does this look like? And is there an education piece, for us with the rest of the organization there?
Absolutely. So for achieving the nirvana of self-service, or AI being just another person, invisible person in the boardroom during meetings, you have to follow several basic controls, right? Basic rules. First of all, you have to have common semantics, right? It's a waste of time and the cause for lots of embarrassment when you look at two reports and totals should be the same, but they're different. How come? And you waste time figuring out that. So define common semantics. Even if it's self-service, semantics, understanding of how we organize our data, how we present our reports should be the same. Training on visualization, and especially, say, visual design, is extremely important. Not every person has that intuitively. You have to explain, you have to teach people where to put the summary, where to put the details, what is progressive information disclosure principle, etc., etc. So it's not rocket science. It's quite teachable, right? You can train business to do that, but it has to happen. It's not like you've got the tool, go, do what you need. And secondly, or the third principle would be towards artificial intelligence. Again, common semantics implemented as knowledge graph, absolutely. But also identify the use cases for which you are going to use AI. Don't rely on that tool, that thing knows everything in the world. It does not, or maybe it does, but it has to answer the questions that are pertinent to your business, pertinent to your specific situation, pertinent to your specific customers, products, or other activities that you perform.
I think AI is obviously, it's like everything, it's going to change our world. It's a paradigm shift, and there's no point pretending it's not going to change data and analytics and insights teams. Igor's touched on a number of the underpinning component parts, and obviously when you think about developing a report or a dashboard or an analytical model, the front end is just a tiny portion of that. All the work behind and building the semantics and the flows, they're going to be improved, of course, by AI, and it will take time for those things to get to a point where it's easy to automate those things. We're already starting to see it now, of course. The front end will naturally change. We already see it in products like Power BI. There are other products around, obviously, that do it, but you can auto-generate dashboards just by asking questions. So, of course, that visual design piece is probably going to change. I just don't think it's going to happen that as quickly as perhaps we think it is. It's probably a few years away for some organizations, and for others, it'll be sooner. Like for me, if I go back over, I've been doing this for 25 years. Like when we first moved to self-service business intelligence, I kind of used to have a little tear in my eye about how many hours of my life and my team's life we'd wasted in building reports in old business intelligence tools that we could now do in 5 minutes. And of course, that's now magnified. We can do it in seconds just by asking a question in a natural language. But the underlying problem hasn't changed in 25 years. We still have to be passionate about solving our business problems, and AI is just going to help us do that better and quicker in the short term.
And Steve touched on very much the key point there, and that is area of focus. Right? We all look at AI, autonomization as meaning, all of these jobs are going to go away. And fair, there are efficiencies, admittedly. I'm not going to pretend that there aren't, but let's focus on what truly matters here. And there's a whole other range of problems to solve here. One of the advantages with a lot of the self-serve platforms is that any user can come, any business person can come, ask a question, get any answer they want. The disadvantage is they can go in and ask a question, get any answer that they want. There are challenges there, and this is where you need to have people that understand the data, understand the boundaries, understand what's in line, what's not in line, and being able to help there. And that's a lot more work than people realize. And a lot of our research touches on, what are those key things that you need to really worry about.
And peeping into the future, I would say, probably we're going away from dashboards, right?
Yeah.
Most likely the next generation of BI will be more like a movie. Storytelling. It's a short movie. We want to thoroughly understand certain topic. Here is the movie. It discusses it from various aspects. And secondly, interactivity, right? It's no longer, remember in the old days, I want to see what's happening. We took 2 weeks to build these reports. Now we show what's happening. Okay, why it's happening? Wait for another 2 weeks. It doesn't work this way, right? Our exponential IT research trend has proven that, right? There is no more waste of time to wait for insights, to wait for data to support your decisions. It has to be interactive, it has to be real time. Again, it will require rewiring of the background.
You are touched on something really important there about, again, I like the movie analogy very much. First time hearing that from you, that was really great. But the idea of, I'm gonna go look at something and then why, so then I'm gonna go answer that question. They're gonna go answer the following question. Right, with the limits of 20, 25 years ago, dot matrix printers, dashboards, you can answer one kind of question at one time, and then you need to go figure out how am I going to answer my next set of questions. If I can answer 4 or 5 questions in relative rapid succession, right, in the form of a movie that's telling me a story, then imagine what I can do with that. There's a whole other range of problems that now can be solved. There's a whole other range of thinking. There's a whole burden that's taken off my shoulders now because I can answer all of these questions relatively quickly. So it creates a wonderful set of opportunities for the business.
I think there's one, just listening to you both talk, something sprang to mind, which we're not talking about though, which is self-service is brilliant in whatever form it is, whether it's video or whatever form. But the question has to remain, how are you using that data? Like, if you're just using it to reconfirm your own biases, nothing's changing, right? You're actually looking for things to change, or you have to understand, you have to ask yourself the question, like, how am I intending to use this? What's the purpose of this? And one of those things we see a lot of sort of data literacy. It's really focused around, like, understanding better use data, but the key component part is breaking down your assumptions. It's very hard, like, for us to break out of the fact, if you've been working in a business function for a long time, you understand that function. It's part of your DNA almost, that you think about it. Often you're going to use data to confirm your own biases when it tells you something you're uncertain of. As you position that into self-survey and make it easier, are we actually asking the right questions? Are we breaking down those problems? Are we educating ourselves to ask the difficult problems and be prepared for the change that generates?
And I want to focus on that for a second. I mean, when we look at the title of the research, Build a Reporting and Analytical Insight Strategy, that's what we're talking about. That's true insight there. Not that I'm confirming everything that I know about the world. It's, wow, I didn't realize that it actually worked like that. Like, those are the kinds of insights that we want to encourage in it.
Then you have to accept what data is showing you, because that's denial thing is very common.
Absolutely.
Oh, I'm seeing, no, it shouldn't be this way, right? And as data scientists' favorite joke is, you torture data long enough, it will confess of anything, right?
Yes,
right? You have to accept what data is showing you. If it's something unpleasant, verify, double check, but don't try to coerce analytics into answering into bringing the answer that you expect to get.
So let's talk a little bit about what this looks like, because one of the themes I see coming out of the way technology is going is, in some senses, I guess you could call it the democratization of insight, or the democratization of reporting and analytics. But what we've seen in the past is what that can lead to is either asking the wrong question or ending up with a proliferation of reports, dashboards, whatever the outcome is, that all answer questions this big. Is that the world that we're going toward? Is that the world we want to build? Or how do we make sure we govern that in some way to solve this problem?
Back to the boardroom. We need to solve our specific business problems. Don't forget about that, right? And is it fascinating to have different perspectives, to have those flashy diagrams? It's fascinating, but it's a waste of time. We need to get to a specific business point, and Steve was right. We need to establish business metrics of effective decision-making measurement. Right, and it requires a significant cultural change, because I don't think any manager would like to acknowledge, oh, I made a mistake, or I made the wrong decision. However, we should always recollect the ancient wisdom that a wise person is not the one who has never made a mistake. A wise person who has made mistakes and learned from them.
I probably go back to the implication that proliferation is a problem. And I would say probably for a lot of organizations it has been. But I guess we have to challenge ourselves the question about why do we care? Right, what's the implication for that? I would say typically proliferation has come from the fact that people can't find the information they need, so they just recreate it for themselves. So of course it's inefficient. But you actually have to analyze the consumption to know whether that's true or not, because in a highly complex federated organization, you're having tens of thousands of dashboards, reports, probably quite normal. They're probably all getting used to some degree. Like, you have to actually ask yourself the question, is it a real problem, and do we have to solve it? You touched on something earlier on, which I think is the most important thing of kind of certainly a modern stack in the way we approach it, which is the common semantics and discoverability of data, being able to discover data that you're looking for easily, and understanding the context in which it was created and whether you can use it for your use, and then making an educated decision as like, I will use that, and therefore you're reducing the proliferation because you're finding the thing that you need. That's the most important nuts and bolts of how we make data more accessible to people. But I don't think we should fear proliferation. You should fear waste is probably the thing that you're actually looking at here.
I'm fine with proliferation. I don't have an issue with it. I just don't want to fall rear backwards into proliferation, right? I want it to be a conscious choice. Right? I mean, even in my day-to-day, right, I run reports understanding research usage, call statistics. And I'm sure I've created a wonderful report where there are 15 other wonderful reports that do similar things. But do I care? It's suited to what I need, and guardrails have been set up for me so I don't do certain kinds of things, and it's fine. And it really is about being purposeful with these kinds of choices, right? Don't by accident fall into these situations.
Yeah. And I would also say that we can apply general rules of market economy here, right? Proliferation, affordability of very different tools is good. It's good, but now the market is inundated with BI and analytical tools. Now what you need to do, the next one, the market has to rationalize those tools. You have to rationalize for your company, and that's exactly what Steve was talking about. You have to establish this economic measurement of success of your decision making. That will help you rationalize down and create economically driven BI and analytics. The BI and analytics that really support your business case, your organizational goals, and they are oriented at moving everyone ahead instead of just going astray and entertaining yourselves in new technology.
For people looking to get started at improving their reporting analytical insight program, what are one or two key changes you'd recommend they make right off the bat to get the most impact?
Establish somebody who owns the portfolio, complete portfolio of BI and analytics. Establish somebody who would understand. Again, I'm not talking about centralizing BI function. I'm talking about ownership and accountability. A person who would equally understand technical capabilities, what we can deliver, and what the business is really asking. And understand, okay, if business is asking several things, which are of them real priority, where we need to focus. So for me, that'll be number one thing to start with.
I think there are a few quick things that you can do to get started. Like we've talked quite at length in this session around understanding your business. Like invest in spending time understanding your business is your first thing. Go and map out your key stakeholders, understand their pain points. Don't underestimate how hard that is. Like it takes time and effort. Like that's where the value comes from, is understanding the problem. So if I put someone accountable, go and talk to your business. Understand your landscape as the next step. Like what can you deliver today? What are you delivering today? Don't boil the ocean. You're not going to solve this problem overnight. We talked earlier, it's a cultural change. Accept that it's a cultural change. It's going to take you time, and just look for the little wins. Start anchoring. The whole framework is anchored around strategic alignment and understanding your customers. Start in those two places. Your operating model, again, we've discussed between federated and central. It's probably going to change over time. Might do, might not. That's not the important thing. The important thing is delivering value to your business and understanding your customers. And so I would employ anybody getting started, that's where you start, because that's going to shape all of the decisions that you make. And they are not complicated things to start with, but they are difficult things, because the human side, the change management piece, is the most difficult thing that you're doing.
And one more thing, maybe not so obvious, you have to ensure that you can get to your data at the time when you need it. It's outside of BI and analytical insights blueprint. It's about data management, right? But it's foundational. If you figure out your BI analytics portfolio, if you've got all the toolkits to create any solution, to answer any question, but you can't get hold of data, or the data you got is of very bad quality, it's not the winning team, right? Yes. So where to start? Again, make sure that the data you need or might need for BI and analytics is accessible and of good quality.
I think you've hit on a really interesting thing. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, sorry. Was if anybody's looking for a reason why they should do this, and the numbers speak for themselves, and you touched on it right there, it's estimated around 60% of most organizations can't get the data they need when they need it. And sometimes that data can be up to like 6 months out of date. That's astonishing when you think about you're using that decision, that information to make critical decisions for your business. You should be able to get a fairly quick sense of how deep that problem is in your own organization. And that manifests itself in real, tangible business dollar problems. We estimate for most organizations it's something around 10 million plus a year in wasted inefficiencies from reproducing data, fixing data to service your kind of decision-making need. That's money that you can spend elsewhere on growing your customer base, improving your services, helping your people. It has a real tangible impact. So if you're looking for a reason why we should do this, those things in itself should be able to justify that need.
There you go. Gentlemen, this has been wonderful. I really appreciate your time and your insights today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Let's talk about the methodology here. Can you walk me through, what our process is for, building this strategy, and, what are the different, steps of the blueprint?
Yeah, certainly. So there's probably 5 key steps. The first one, as you'd expect from a strategy, is understanding your business. So working and with your business functions to understand their strategic goals and priorities, looking at the organization as a whole to understand its sort of goals and priorities, so the efforts that you want to focus into data and analytics and insights are geared towards helping the organization achieve its goals. That's the very first place to start. And we've talked at length about the need to understand business need, and that starts at a strategy level all the way down to operations. So that's kind of the first stage. The second stage is really around your operating model, and that varies from organization to organization. There's generally a scale of that. So do you do it as a centralized reporting and insights team, or are you federated out into the business functions? In reality, most organizations are somewhere in the middle, some sort of more extremes. And that places different emphasis on who does what within the overarching set of capabilities and things you need to do for data and analytics. So as a centralized team in a central model, you kind of do everything. So you produce the reports, you do all the streamlined and the processing of the data to that point. it's less of a governance burden because everybody's in the same team. It's easier to maintain standards. As you push towards more the business side, a more federated model, of course, you're putting those skills and capabilities within the business. So the centralized team spends less time producing. It's more about educating and upskilling and governing and making sure that people follow the right practices. Obviously makes your environment more complicated. But there's a reason why most businesses move towards a more federated model is what we typically find and what we typically see from most organizations, the closer the data teams sit towards the business, the greater business understanding that they have. And so they're kind of narrowing that gap between understanding the customer and their need and execution. But what we see is probably very patchy standards being applied. So we see lots of issues potentially in the underlying infrastructure and the way that the applications work because design practices are not being upheld. And so we help, once you understand your strategic vision, we need to look at how do you want to execute on that and help you kind of determine what's the best model for you. That's not set in time either. So you might do it one model to start with an intention to move elsewhere. And our approach enables you to kind of look at what do the skills need to be and how do they need to evolve over time if you want to move from more of a central model to a federated model over time. The third step then is about what are those capabilities. Now you understand where they need to sit, how do you align those into the different teams? So what do you need to do centrally? What do you need to do in a more federated model? And again, all of those things are anchored upon what are you trying to achieve at a strategic level. And so we encourage people not to be utopian about this. This is about understanding specifically what you need to deliver what your business understands about. So although there are a set of standard sort of mechanics of things that you go through, you don't necessarily need to be the best at all of those things to achieve the value that your organization needs. And then the final kind of step of the wheel is really around how do you set yourself up to continuously improve. Reporting and insights is never done. It continually moves. Your job is to make sure that you can move with the change of the business and deliver that value. So once you've understood the capabilities and start to develop them, you need to have a mindset to continuously improve. And then the final part of the framework is really around the centerpiece, which we've discussed at length, but is absolutely the most important thing, is like anchoring everything in human-centered design. So once you get into the delivery mechanism of building out insights models, that you're solely focused on the person challenge, the human challenge that's sitting at the center of that. Because you could be strategically aligned, but if no one uses your product, it doesn't matter. And so like we anchor everything within the middle of those things. So there's a sort of prescribed set of steps which make perfect sense and align to what would be a very sensible approach to strategy. And then the difference maker is that piece in the middle, which is really anchoring everything you do when you get into the execution stage on your customers.
It sounds like with this initiative and going through it, there's kind of two components of it coming out of it. You know, one of them is, yes, you get artifacts that are going to help you go through this, but the other one is, it sounds like mindset, right? It's changing kind of the hearts and minds within the reporting and analytics function about what their role is. I mean, first of all, is that model roughly right? And second of all, on the artifact side, you know, what are some of the artifacts that are produced going through?
Actually, what you're building is a culture, right? And that's the most important thing. The artifacts are what you would expect. The first thing we help you do is understand the sentiment of your customers. We get you to talk to them and understand how they feel about the services that you're providing to date. There's a couple of reasons for that. You want to identify where you have people who are not invested in the things that you do, and you want to be able to find advocates for the service that you do have. You need to promote as well as fix. We then help you with the kind of understanding your capabilities. Where are you at today? How far do you need to go to be able to address and achieve the things that you need to do? A very sort of capability-based view of those things, again, aligned to that target operating model. So what do you need to do as a central team? What do you need to do as a federated team? And then finally, we help you put together the strategy. What are the key things that you're going to focus on? And then the roadmap for the first year and then for the time beyond that. So that's kind of the key outputs. But the most important part, as you talked about, is the culture. And what we try to do is we're helping you organize those things. We start from the kind of sentiment of your customers to anchor you in thinking about your customers, and all the capabilities are geared towards how do you set your culture to be rigorously focused on caring about solving your business partners' problems, not the technical disciplines. We don't obviously ignore the technical disciplines, they're hugely important. But we're really emphasizing the need for you to focus on agreeing value, listening to your customers, doing the analysis of their needs, developing with them, showcasing, getting them to participate in the development cycle and give feedback continuously. All very sort of product management type disciplines. But again, we come back to the fact that this is a product and service function. So to your point, it's about culture.
So with that in mind, Steve, you know, walking through this, How long does it take to get to the desired results here and get to real change? And how much can be done in one concentrated week of effort?
I think the key thing to bear in mind, this is the first step of a long journey, or the hard work actually comes after you've got the strategy and the execution of the strategy. In terms of how far you can go in a week, you can go a lot in a week. There's a dependency on that. We can help you get to having a pretty well-formed strategy at the end of that week, but you need to have your business stakeholders in the room with you, and that's the key thing. And obviously our workshop structure for that, what you can do in a week is bring in your most important business functions, your business partners, really help analyze with them the challenges they have. You're not trying to boil the ocean at this stage. You're trying to identify what are the most critical things that you can address in the short term. And so we can help you get to that position within a really short period of time. A week is certainly enough time to be able to get a good view of that. And so again, at the end of that process, you're going to have understood your biggest pain points. You're going to have a roadmap and an overarching high-level view of your strategy as to where you can get to.
Steve, thanks so much for joining today. I really appreciated your insights.
Thanks, Jeff. Appreciate the time.
And for everyone who's interested in learning more about how to build a reporting and analytical insight strategy, check out the full blueprint at infotech.com.